A couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a classmate give her intended sermon for her pulpit this weekend up in Castro Valley. And her message was quite powerful, but afterwards my biggest question for her was whether or not she was sure she had the right Torah portion. How can two rabbinic students not be certain what the right Torah portion is? Well, I'll tell you. You see, we just read from the beginning of Tazria Metzora, a double portion, but in Israel they've already moved on to the portion we'll read next week. My classmate had inadvertently moved on with the Israelis. So we had a good laugh about this, but you might be thinking, aren't all Jews supposed to read the same Torah portion every week? Well, yes, we are. We aren't supposed to be out of sync with Israel. The reason for the gap lies in the fact that outside of Israel, we typically observe an additional day of Passover, an 8th day. And normally this wouldn't create the gap in our Torah portion, our Torah readings, but this year Passover began on Shabbat. And as you might recall, that means it ended on Shabbat. And so because the last day of Passover was also a Shabbat, Israel moved on without us since they had finished the day before. So this doesn't happen every year. But when it does, it means that we are out of sync with Israel.
Will it remain out of sync?
I'll get there.
Okay.
It seems fitting and powerful to me that this Shabbat, days after celebrating Israel's 67th year of independence, we are out of sync with our Israeli counterparts. It seems ironic, too, because lately we can't avoid hearing headlines declare, American Jews are out of sync with Israel, or the next generation is out of touch with their Zionist roots. Some of these headlines celebrate this, others mourn. But wherever you stand on the political spectrum, I think we can agree that the American Jewish community is not of one voice when it comes to Israel. So we're not only out of sync with Israel this week, but we are also out of sync with each other about Israel. This inability to talk to each other has also been in the headlines. Less than 2 weeks ago, Peter Beinart, writing in Haaretz, wrote that Zionism is a less and less unifying force in American Jewish life. And he noted that it is already common to hear American Jews say they can't talk about Israel with their family members. In other words, we are so out of sync with each other that sometimes we can't even have a meaningful conversation about Israel without fear of offending those we're in dialogue with. For the Torah cycle, getting back in sync is quite easy. We just have to wait 3 or 4 weeks, and on May 16th, when we in the diaspora will combine 2 portions, Behar and Bechukotai, our Israeli counterparts will take 2 weeks for those portions on May 9th and May 16th, respectively. If only getting back in sync were so easy when it comes to our dialogue about Israel. But it's not so simple. Yet ultimately, I think this gap provides an excellent chance for analysis and introspection. What should my relationship be with Israel? What should our relationship with Israel be as American Jews and as Americans? And maybe most importantly, in what ways do we seek to be in sync with Israel? These are fundamental questions for defining a Zionist identity. And we know that there is an incredibly wide range of approaches to them. For some American Jews, Israel can do no wrong. For others, she does only or mostly wrong. For some, their Zionism requires a bit of distance. They prefer to leave the internal politics of Israel to the Israelis. For others, their Zionism is tough love, speaking out against the challenges they see in Israel. These beliefs are so strong and so emotional that we avoid the tough conversation. But tonight, I don't want to avoid it. Don't worry. I'm not going to tell you how to feel about Israel. But I do believe that one way we get back in sync with Israel and with each other is to engage on these tough conversations and to do so openly and honestly. Rabbi Melissa Weintraub reminds us that our tradition encompasses a practice of machloket, of sacred disagreement, and that conversations and disagreements are meant to be generative rather than destructive. They're meant to help build us up rather than to break us down. So in that spirit, I will share a few of my beliefs about Israel. I believe in the right of the Jewish people to political sovereignty in the land of Israel. I also believe in democracy, even when it seems to conflict with the status quo. I believe in the Israel that is a world leader on countless fronts. I also believe that Israel has a long way to go to live up to our highest ideals and aspirations. I believe in Israel's right to defend herself and her citizens. I also believe that the Palestinian people has a right to a state, and that they have a narrative that I know too little about. Some of these beliefs probably seem to contradict each other. It might seem like I'm out of sync with myself, like I've internalized that sacred disagreement, perhaps. And perhaps I have. But maybe that is part of getting back in sync. Maybe during this time of being out of sync with Israel, we are being given a reminder that we can use that feeling for productive means, to be generative rather than destructive, as Rabbi Weintraub puts it. We can use it to better define our Zionist identity, individually and maybe even communally. We can use it to re-engage in productive and healthy dialogue, even when the emotional stakes are so high. We can remember that just as American Jews are not of one voice, so goes with the Israeli public, within whom there is baffling diversity when it comes to issues of Zionism, politics, and the future of the Jewish people. We can use this gap to jumpstart the conversation and to make our voices heard. This weekend, I encourage you to make your voices heard to each other about Israel, and I remind you that sometimes that means we'll have to work with sacred disagreement. Luckily, there's another way to make our voices heard about Israel, and I'll encourage you to take it also. For the past couple of months, the World Zionist Organization has been holding its elections for the seats to represent American Jews at the World Zionist Congress this fall. The voting ends in 6 days, on April 30th. And any Jewish adult can register and vote online before then. Our reform movement is only one of 11 platforms seeking to represent our voices as American Jews. There are 6 days left, and I encourage you to check it out. And so ultimately, my prayer tonight is that we learn from this gap with our Israeli counterparts in our Torah cycle and in our political lives, and that we use it to re-engage each other in dialogue. May we make our voices heard when it comes to Israel, and may we be humble enough to hear the voices of others. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this too be God's will.